And we're live. Let's do this.
Let's do this.
I'm excited.
Ladies and gentlemen,
This is a
welcome back.
on a Monday again, of course. So
Mondays might be our new groove, guys. It seems like it might start working. We used to be on Mondays, right?
yeah, and then just life happened. So, but I
Then life happened.
you know what? I think we're good.
I think we're fantastic.
So
Well, guys, welcome back to episode 126.
yeah,
Testing
126.
Testing normal. Coming in hot. We're coming in hot. It's been a pretty good week. Jordan had a fantastic vacation.
I did.
To Big Bear Wolf Lodge.
Big Bear Wolf Lodge. You know what I didn't know? Maybe I'm just ignorant. Or it's just like I don't really know where the lines are. I didn't realize that those are on Indian reservations.
Right. Yeah.
And also,
I had heard that before.
how come we can say Indian reservations, but if we call them Indians, we're horrible people?
Well, I've never heard that.
Well, they're
It's a
like
horrible
Native American, but we
term.
don't call them Native American reservations. I was just thinking about this the other day. I was like, it is kind of weird.
Yeah, I think I've heard it called Indian reservation. I didn't know. I haven't heard Indian being a derogatory
It's not
term,
derogatory, but it's incorrect because it's what we thought. They thought they were coming to India, so they thought they were Indians.
Oh, okay.
They're like, no, they're
I
Native
gotcha.
Americans, which is fine. It doesn't bother me either way. I just find it funny. number one, I didn't know that. I think it's all the Great Wolf Lodges are on Indian reservations.
Is there a casino on the lodge? That's a question.
No.
Is there gambling on that? There's no gambling?
There's always a gamble when you're going down water slides with children.
And what is the reward? It's the question. There's always a risk, but is there much of a reward? Not a lot.
Yeah, you're like,
not a lot. Just a bit of water up your nose.
There's one missing. Wait, that's not a reward.
Okay, we're gonna start off with our TILs, guys.
Yes, we are.
We do not want to forget that. I have 2, you have 1, so I will go first. Mon frere.
Do it.
Mon frere. Something that's near and dear to my heart and very relevant to most people in our lives. Today I learned that there are no more than 12 Kmart stores remaining in the United States as of today. At its peak in 1994, there were 2,323 stores and over almost 2,500 globally. Until 1990, when it was surpassed by Walmart. It was the second largest retailer in the United States after Sears.
What was their demise?
And now it's no longer with us.
There's 12.
That's a great question.
Also, I wasn't aware that there was even 12. I was thinking it was like 0. Because like the one that was near us is totally gone. I think it went away because of one phrase. And no one saw it coming. It was Kmart fall
was
apart.
Oh, I've never heard that phrase.
Really? Yeah. So
No.
that was a phrase that went around when I was a kid. Kmart fall apart. And it was just like known
funny.
that's like it's just cheap crap, you know. And so I think that's what brought it on. They were like they didn't see it coming. They're like didn't know that their name was going to rhyme with fall apart. And then they just fell apart.
Well, I honestly didn't know anybody that would frequent that store. And so that would say something. There must have been something about the quality of their
So the one that was around here,
merchandise.
not like recognized as one of the greatest neighborhoods. And
That's true.
you see a lot of stores go in and out because they're built in the nice place. And then the nice place becomes the old place and becomes the not so nice place. And then it moves on to something else.
But the contrary to that is Costco was right next to Kmart or pretty close to it. And it still remains
Costco?
a powerhouse in that area. Yeah. Costco is right next to Kmart on Mission or like just down the street from it.
No. Oh, yeah. But it's like up by the freeway. That's the difference. If you go down, like that neighborhood in that area is not great.
It's industrial too.
It's industrial.
Yeah.
It's up against industrial, and that it's up against that neighborhood that's across the street there. That's like some of the most crime in Salem. So
true.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Kmart.
TILs for Kmart.
Kmart fall apart.
Hit me.
Okay. Today I learned about the French GIGNs. So I had to look this up. Basically, it's like their higher end police or police force. Their faith shot. After training, new recruits must shoot a small clay pigeon placed on their teammate's bulletproof vest with a revolver to demonstrate the shooter's faith in their own aim and the target's faith in their teammate.
The French aren't playing around.
No, that is...
They do that still?
Yes, the picture I saw was legit recent.
Bold move, Kmart. Or, France.
Kmart. Kmart's like, no. We did the faith shot.
Listen,
totally killed them.
Stick around. For all of the bad rep that the French get for their military and or their success in wars, I feel like that's a pretty aggressive move for the French.
Yeah, I would say so. I say it's pretty... Yeah. Although that's their police force against their own people. We're not talking about their military. Look out, French military. We're not talking about their military that would be against other people. So maybe their military is not as tough and they need to swap places.
That could be.
I don't know.
Okay.
You go.
My last TIL for y'all. Today I learned the smallest skeletal muscle in the human body is the stapedius muscle, which is about 1 millimeter in length. So that's an individual muscle in the human body, 1 millimeter in size.
How'd they find
its
this
main
thing?
purpose is, well, it actually kind of makes sense. Its main purpose is to stabilize the smallest bone in the body, the stapes or the stirrup bone, which is a bone responsible for your bone conduction
Oh,
in the
that
middle
makes
ear.
total sense then. Okay.
So
Okay. Okay.
when you're looking in the middle ear, you could see that muscle independent of other muscles,
Yeah.
um, which is fascinating. A 1 millimeter independent little baby muscle,
Yeah.
little baby muscle,
Hmm.
little baby muscle, little baby muscle. Okay, so first topic, guys, we wanted to throw at you tonight, and let us know how you feel about this. Russia, what's going on?
Let's
What's the
hit heavy with
situation?
Russia first, and then we'll go into the fun
Let's
stuff.
hit something light.
Yeah.
We'll just kind of dabble on a little Russia situation
Yeah.
here. Um, it was a a busy time in my life when Russia kind of took out the Crimean region. Um, I wasn't super cognizant of what was taken like politics wise into account at that time, but from my understanding, Crimea was a purpose to be access to a port, another big waterway for Russia. But then during the USSR time, all of Ukraine was part of USSR, from my understanding. I mean, and many other countries as well. But the kind of media information that I'm getting right now is that's what Russia hopes to reacquire.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of natural resources in Ukraine. They have a lot of natural gas, as well as Russia does also. But so there's resources that would benefit Russia, but also Russia likes to have Ukraine under control because it gives a good buffer between Russia and NATO. And that's the big issue there, from my understanding.
Ukraine they're not a very wealthy region, right? From what I understand.
Ukraine's fascinating. They're a very large region in that kind of Eastern Europe area.
Okay.
They have a lot of potential resources. They have a direct connection to the Black Sea, which then has a way of accessing the Mediterranean Sea from there. And the kind of controversy is Ukraine has not always been very stable from their leadership. And so
Right.
that's a big portion why they haven't come across as very wealthy, because they've been a lot of corruption within their country.
Well,
but they could
their
be.
leadership.
They could be.
You can go look up. Like, there's some broadcasts that they broadcast to their people, like apologizing, and like their secret police were the ones that discovered the oil, like embezzling of money going on that was costing the citizens like millions and millions of dollars. That is the scandal that Hunter Biden was caught up in, because he was the liaison to Ukraine and was the proxy for his dad when he was vice president. And you can go look up and watch the broadcasts of them interviewing the people that came forward and gave testimony in order to get a more lenient sentence that led to the issuing of a warrant for the arrest of both Joe and Hunter Biden in the Ukraine.
But then that got
They took it away, but it's all the stuff is still there saying this is where we got tied to. And they even have the recordings that are up in public of him calling and kind of BSing his way through the leadership when he was getting ousted as vice president. It's
one
interesting.
maneuver.
So the government had a lot of people in there that were basically ripping off their own people who already aren't known for being the most wealthy.
Yeah, and that's not an uncommon story we hear from a lot of countries that are kind of rebuilding themselves from the USSR as well.
Right.
I mean, outside of Germany, which obviously kind of was a staple of the Europe.
Just doesn't help when your own people are trying to screw you over.
Right. Totally. One thing that's interesting, though, and what's a potential clever maneuver that the U.S. and other NATO allies are doing with the Kremlin is, and this is what one of the articles that I've listed talks about, they are talking about not necessarily having sanctions on Russian imports as a whole, but doing a lot of sanctions on some of the Russian elites in particular. So a lot of like Vladimir Putin's inner circle are going to be hit with economic sanctions if the Kremlin were to order an invasion of Ukraine.
Oh.
So essentially, like some of like the wealthiest people who oftentimes have some of the most prominent influence in a country are going to
Mm.
have potential sanctions placed on their wealth and like their items, their assets. So can you imagine, a billionaire in Russia has assets in the UK and in surrounding nations and US, and then they say, hey, we actually are going to seize all of your assets now, and they're going to become a part of our country,
Right.
unless your country gets its shit together. And so there's a very maybe it might be a clever play, unless Putin says, hey, I'll reimburse you for everything that these countries take from you, which I don't know, if he has those resources, but it's kind of not a bad play in my head. But one of them is, I was looking at like what are some of these big assets that they own. So there's quite a bit, but one of the bigger ones is one of the main oligarchs or whatever in Russia is the owner of the Chelsea football club, which is like a really big soccer
Right.
team in
It's
Europe.
pronounced football. Right.
Football, football, football. So yeah, there's just several things that could be taken from them and kind of place pressure on them. Honestly, how much we should be involved in politics in Eastern Europe, I kind of have a mixed feeling about that personally.
It just depends on
But
what it affects and how it
interesting.
would come back and affect us. I still firmly believe, I think to some extent, bigger countries that have power should protect smaller countries that can't themselves, to a degree.
To a degree.
And I think that if a country is doing things that are going to affect the world, the bigger countries should get together and do something about it. I'm not saying that means start a war. I think that should always be the last resort that we ever get to. But I am a big fan of like when one of Trump's, I think it was an executive order that did a huge tax basically on imports for China because of what they were doing to the world. Tax the heck out of them. Like, make it so that if they're gonna rip things off, like what was the joke I made with you the other day? You said that of all the how many engineers are created in China. That was an interesting fact.
In China, it was every year China creates more engineers than the United States has engineers as a whole.
Yeah, and my response back was, I want to know the numbers on how many of those are reverse engineers.
Right, which is a great point. Like, how many of them go to engineering school to learn how
and
to
this was
reverse
something,
engineer?
So this was something that was brought up
Other
by Mike Pompeo, actually, who was speaking at a college in, I believe it was Georgia, it was Florida or Georgia. He's really, like, if you go back and look at some of his like foreign policy and who he's dealt with and stuff, I'm really impressed. I'm sure he's messed up some places. I'm neither here nor there on it.
Yeah.
I think he's done some cool things. But one thing that he did mention and bring up, and I think we might have talked about this before, is that the one thing that we lose in this country is we have a ton of foreign nationals that come in to go to our schools and then take that information and don't use it here. And so one of the things that he was saying is there should be a time period on that if they are using scholarships or coming here or whatever, that they have to serve out their time basically helping this country that they came to do that in, versus going back and basically removing knowledge and using it in other places. And I thought that was interesting because he had statistics on like how many of them go back to China. And then that was he said that right around that time that list came out of the Chinese Communist Party spies who were basically in every organization in the world, and had that rule that if there's like more than 3 of them in one, they have to form a cell and report back to the CCP.
If there's more than one spy in a location,
Well, they have to form their own cell in that location to share the information with each other and then report back to the CCP. So he was bringing that up as a point, like one of our things that hurts us that we export is our knowledge.
yeah, but it's also a situation, I guess, in that case, I mean, you can't keep somebody in the country. So then in that situation, it's changing what your acceptance rates
Exactly.
are.
And that's kind of what he was saying, was like, if we're going to do
populations.
this, then we maybe it's only ones that have a contract to work with U.S. companies, or whatnot. Like that would limit it, and it limits our export, should you say, of
Interesting.
our knowledge, so that we can produce more. He was saying like we don't produce enough
You
because
know,
we send all of our good educated people back out of our country.
one country that it is interesting to me is that sanctions have not proven fruitful, even though they do have support from China, but not a significant amount, like not amounts that create like a healthy population. Like it is surprising me how successful North Korea has been at maintaining a regime despite overwhelming sanctions that no other country has ever been levied on them to that degree.
Yeah, they don't.
It's kind
Everything
of
that they
wild.
do. I mean, they're not even able to have. You're not even able to sell or buy brands from other
Right.
countries. It's. I mean, from the stuff that
It's
I've
wild.
watched on them, and there's some great like YouTube documentaries where people got permission to go in and like shoot different things. It's mind-boggling. It looks fake. It feels a lot like, and arguably worse than like the Hunger Games movies. Like the way that people are brainwashed into being in their own little areas. But like even their technology, there's only one phone that you can get. It's produced by them. There's only one computer that you can get. It's produced by them. It's their own operating
Right.
system. You can only open up stuff that the computer created or that the government sends you, and you forfeit. You basically have to forfeit yourself to a once a month audit of what's been done on that computer. They come in and check it. And that's even considering you could afford it.
Right.
Um,
Yeah,
so you just keep people brainwashed. That's how they do it. And the thing is like
it's wild.
I
But the fact that it has lasted as long as it's lasted, I
I
mean,
don't I
granted,
don't think it. Sadly, the people are the ones that are harmed. And when I think that we get confused in this country when we say things like, um, you know, we need to put sanctions on China. We're not talking about the Chinese people. The Chinese people are suffering as well, and we want good for the bulk of the people that are there that are just putting up with
right.
that regime. We have nothing wrong with them. It's the power hungry people, and we would say that about the power hungry people in our own country. Even though we are afforded way more freedoms, there are still people that get corrupt with power. It's just they're a lot further down the road than we
One
are.
thing I would say a shout out I have is for my man. Well, let me preface this. I have had issues with certain actors that have been
John
very
Cena.
sympathetic to certain CCP parties
Yes.
um, that will, if you speak anything against potential human injustices, they will basically give into political pressure, John Cena, and apologize to certain communist parties.
Right.
Um, and one thing I have a ton of respect for, and we've talked about this before, and I know John O, this is one of his favorite actors and characters as
It
well.
is.
But Keanu Reeves, so much respect for this dude. He had a rally and fundraiser that he participated in that was basically talking a fundraiser for the Tibetan culture and people. And the Chinese government doesn't recognize Tibet as an independent state. And
Which they
so,
tend to do when they
uh,
want to just take something over and make it their own.
right, a lot of Chinese patriots basically were saying we shouldn't watch the new Matrix movie now. And they said something along the lines of, there was a quote actually from, this is interesting. So they're like main leaning, super patriotic. You would consider like in the United States, they'd be considered like they're far right. But they're called the little, they call themselves the little pinks, which is an interesting, I don't know,
They
interesting.
should probably think about
Um,
that.
to each their own, cultural things. Um, but one of their quotes was, "How can Keanu Reeves not understand this and take part in a pro-Tibetan independent concert?" And then it says, um, "Oh, where was it? Where was it? They said, okay, the film can be taken down now. Get out of the Chinese market. Thank you." And it's like, well, Keanu Reeves, I respect the fact that he um, is an advocate for people that have certain
Yeah.
injustices, and he doesn't care about how the Hollywood is going to perceive it. I was
Right.
like, strong work, Keanu. Strong work, brother.
Yeah.
I
You
like
may
that.
not always be the greatest actor, but no one can argue that
You always
you
be
still know kung fu.
you'll always be our actor.
It's
You might not be the greatest
yeah,
actor, but you'll
but
be
you'll
our
always be
actor.
our actor. I mean, and
Love them. Love
John
them.
Wick, greatest movies in the world, as Jono would also say. Um, some of
Mm-hmm.
the greatest storylines, cinematography, lighting, um,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah,
Soundtracks.
soundtracks, they're the greatest.
They have it all. They have it
So
all.
speaking of the
Um,
Matrix, okay, so we
yes.
had a couple of electronic things that happened this week that we'll go into. It's a little more
Yes, we did.
lighthearted than I don't even. I mean, we went Russia, China, North Korea. Like that was just a hard left turn there. We had a couple of interesting things. So Sony has bought Bungie, who Bungie used to be independent, got bought by Microsoft, then was independent, then got bought by Microsoft, and then they were not owned by Microsoft anymore. They created the series that most people would recognize the most, which is Halo, which is
Mm-hmm.
it is exclusive to the Xbox and now the PC Windows system. So Sony has bought them. Now, those of you that might be following that logic, Sony owns the Sony PlayStation, so not sure what's going to go on here. They also made a small game that some gamers would recognize as Destiny. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
then
That
also
was one of my favorite games.
another
Yep.
small acquisition by Microsoft, who did used to own Bungie, now doesn't a few different times. They have acquired Activision and Blizzard. Thoughts? So these
Okay.
are two big
First of all,
moves in the gaming industry
fascinating.
and electronics
Fascinating.
industry.
So Bungie, for those of you who didn't know, actually started off as a game developer for Macintosh.
Yeah,
That
way
was their
back in the day.
first thing, which is really wild to think about that. Because then, as Jordan alluded to, they became part of Microsoft, um, and now they're part of
Which was
Sony.
after the original
Um,
Halo. So it wasn't like it was because they did
right,
so good that Microsoft said we'll bring them on, and then they didn't, and then they did, they didn't. So
right. Um, so all of this change, I think there's a consolidation that's taking place.
mhm.
I think that there is um, I think that there's pressure. I think that some companies are feeling the pressure of saying, hey, we can't compete with other players in the market, and we need to be able to be competitive when it comes to certain gaming aspects. Now, I think you had said some concepts pertaining to the metaverse with this. Is that
Yeah,
tie into
it
this?
does a little bit. I think that that's kind of where they're positioning themselves. I did make this comment because what bothered me about this was if, Sony buying Bungie and Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard is are they going to start making those types of games more exclusive to one platform versus the other? Because that's what I hate is when people get
Mm-hmm.
I'm much more a fan of games that are platform agnostic, meaning you want to play on a PC, it's going to be on PC. You want to play on
And
Xbox,
that
you can
crossover.
be on Xbox. You want to be on Sony PlayStation, you can be on there. There's a few other gaming platforms that really don't exist, like Google's whatever cloud platform. Amazon has one, and they're all kind of garbage so far. But I'm more a fan of people that lean that way. Microsoft has seemed to be leaning that way a lot more. Um, and so has Epic Games, who they bought like Psyonix, who owns Rocket League. They have Fortnite and a few other bigger games, but they also have their own game platform. They're the ones that we talked a while back about that was suing Apple for
Mm-hmm.
their app ecosystem being not inclusive of their pay to play aspects in their game. I still don't know if that's. I don't think that's actually gone anywhere. They haven't gotten anywhere with Apple. But
Yeah, Apple has
I
not
do
been very
think that
successful.
some of these people that they are going after and positioning themselves with are more like metaverse. And this is like I don't know if well we did cover it, but I don't know if people remember. Like Facebook is like changing a lot of their branding to Meta or Metaverse, which is
Mm-hmm.
like
Right.
it's supposed to be like this world where there's digital ownership and property and you can go and do things with your friends. Facebook has done a really good job of saying they're going to do that and then delivering really, really bad products that do that. And some people are scared. They're like, oh, we already do this. So I was listening to someone the other day who's a really, really big name in investing. It doesn't even really matter what his name is, but he said something that kind of blew my mind, and I want to know your thoughts on this because people are
Love it.
scared. I wouldn't say everyone is. A lot of people are scared that the metaverse would be a thing, that like, oh, people are just going to be gaming. They're going to go in. They're not going to have real life relationships. They're going to, you know what I mean? Like you hear that. That's kind of the stereotype. And this guy was actually posed with the question, could you please explain the metaverse to us? And I thought he was going to go in and explain what I just did. And he didn't. You know what he said? He said, we're already living in the metaverse and people just don't know it yet.
Oh,
And and I was like,
good.
oh, does he think simulation? But no, that's not what he was saying. He said, what we're doing right now, so you and I are doing this right now, was not possible 4 years ago at this
True.
quality.
Very true.
So
Yeah, for sure.
the voice that you're hearing right now is a digital representation in your headphones of me. The face that you're seeing right now is a digital representation of me. And the images that people are seeing right now through Facebook, through YouTube, through the podcast that you're listening to right now are digital representations of who we are. And if you think about the interactions that you have with people, even down to the fact that you call people on a phone, you FaceTime with someone, you send emojis, you send texts, most of your human interactions, except at home, are already in the metaverse, and we haven't even thought of it that way yet.
Right. And you know, that's where we are. It's a what would you say? It's a acclimating kind of change, right? It's a titration change. It's not necessarily something like we're not getting all of this technological advancement into the metaverse all at once.
Right.
But it's something that we don't even recognize until we're
Well, he
in
used the
it,
example of
deeper
the
and
fax
deeper.
machine. He's like, that was a digital marvel at the time. And to be able to stick something, you know, a piece of paper and it comes out a representation of it, you know, an infinite space away. That's wild to even think about. But the fact that
True.
we are having a real-time conversation
True.
right now as if we were sitting in front of each other and we aren't, we already are
Yeah.
to some degree living and representing ourselves that way.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think there's aspects of like our current virtual headset kind of situation that is kind of like the fax machine.
Yeah.
Right. So like our VR headsets are cool and they're bringing about interactive VR simulations. But I think the level of VR and maybe more AR will be implemented to a point where we will think of our current VR headsets as the fax machines.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we look at the cell phones that we used to have, 5-10 years ago. They weren't anything like it. I mean, most people don't even realize like the iPhone hasn't been around that long. It wasn't very long ago that
I know that's crazy.
that you would have just a flip
2010?
phone.
Was that when the iPhone came out? 2010?
Sounds about right. Yeah. So you think about that, like, and the first iPhone didn't even have a camera that took your picture. Now they have, they're essentially the same, but the screen is way more lifelike, and I can talk to someone face to face through, a digital representation of them. And that's just all at the, just sitting in my pocket or the palm of my hand at any time that I want. And the fact that the biggest complaint that everyone has is, man, the battery doesn't last that long. And that's like it, like it's so much an extension. And you could get into like, people are on them too much. People need to interact with people in real life. I get all that. But the thing is like there's an amount of information to be transferred that can't be done face to face all the time. Or there might be somebody who's an expert on something that lives in a different country. And all of this is possible with that too.
Yeah.
And so
it's crazy. It's insane.
We're already living it. The people's fear of it is only because they haven't had explained to them that they're already in it.
What's also unique about it too, though, is we're living in it, but also the capacity to live in it due to the cost barrier has come down so much that's where reality of the metaverse comes
Well,
in.
and that's
When you have
exactly
when you eliminate the cost
so that's
barriers,
exactly
right?
where he went with that. Is he said that before the internet, you know, when we got the internet, we're like, oh, big deal. You know, all these .coms came up, right? And so we're seeing that in some of
Mm-hmm.
the digital asset world where there's just too many options, right? But we saw the .com
Mm-hmm.
bubble blow up, and not all of them made it. In fact, less than 10% of them made it.
Right.
But it had to happen in order to get to where we're at. And like people were like, well, you could read your newspaper online. It's like, okay, cool, like whatever. But the cost barrier for a lot of things came down when the internet was made possible. And then every time there's been something added, the cost barrier has kind of started up here and it's moved gradually down to where it's almost nothing. And now we're kind of at the point where like even our monetary system and everything needs to like level out as well. And so that's where he went into talking about like why a digital metaverse that has scarcity and value and isn't just free needs to come about, because the things that aren't represented in a digital world that got ripped off, that became lessened, were things like art and music and production and stuff like that. And so there's like, he was just kind of likening it to like, we're still in that phase of making the economy work in it, like we've done with a lot of the internet stuff. Now you might argue like Web 1, so when the internet
Mm-hmm.
came out, was just a protocol, and then the monetization of that was the Facebooks and the Twitters and whatnot.
Yeah.
And we're kind
I
of
think
headed back to a let's just be on a protocol. And we've talked about that before. But I just thought it was interesting
Mm-hmm.
like how he was, you know, we've got Microsoft trying to position themselves. We got Facebook trying to position themselves. We've got Sony trying to position themselves into a world where the economy will be more driven towards a metaverse. I've heard a lot of people say recently, like, gaming and metaverse world will become $1 trillion market very soon, like faster than
And
we
that'll be
know.
fascinating to see how gaming on an interactive level, on a commerce level, becomes implemented to a point where the masses would want to enjoy and participate in it.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's
Um,
just people aging into it, because like our
yeah,
our
that could be.
generation was one of the first that grew up like as video games being normal, and but they weren't always there. And then the next generation, they always were there. And now you have this generation of adults that like gaming is part of their entertainment. I have friends that are, you know, adults that don't really watch movies and TV. They play games with their friends. They're actually a lot more immersed with relationships with friends and doing things. Most nights it's just digital. And
Right. Which is fascinating because a lot of the population before them would say, you know, gaming is a maybe more of a antisocial kind of concept,
right.
um, and or an individual concept. Whereas, you know, compared to like, well, if you're reading a book at home by yourself, that's pretty
Yeah. Not to say that that's bad.
individual.
I think that's
Yeah.
healthy. Not to say that watching a show is bad or isn't, you know,
Right.
isn't less or more healthy. I think that the way that people hang out has changed, and I think whether I agree with it, you agree with it, or anyone doesn't agree with it, it doesn't matter. I think the last 2 years have pushed that to happen so much faster than they would have before, because there are people who are still at home, that whether or not they're afraid, or it's just their country doesn't let them do anything, or because they prefer to not go out anymore and would rather be at home. It doesn't really
The
matter the reasoning or the political whatever behind it. I'm not here to discuss that. We've discussed that to death on this
Yeah.
show. But I do think that has pushed that faster than it would have been without it.
The last thing I have that I just, you know, I'm very surprised by, and I want to talk about as far as you know, not so much what they're concerned about, but the fact that they are even relevant topics is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of drama going on with Spotify right now with Joe Rogan for multiple reasons, as far as
So
different.
people,
He's
the
not
people getting
politically.
kicked off, I'm like,
He's
you
not.
were there.
He's not politically correct, obviously, about anything, and but to his credit, like he actually, I feel like he has a wide range of guests that come from different opinions, and some opinions of people I don't agree with, and some I do, but I like the
Yeah.
diversity. Um, but anyways, there's certain people that are lobbying, saying, "Hey, he's pushing certain agenda that we don't agree with. He should be kicked off of Spotify." And one group in particular, or one, I guess, people that would consider themselves advocate or activists, maybe. But it's all over the news. It's talking about Harry and Meghan
Most useless
Markle.
two people in
Harry,
politics in the world.
Harry, what was his name? Harry, stop, not Harry Styles. Harry, hold on a second, I'll tell you guys. Prince Harry, whatever his last name was.
They're just figurehead. They're figurehead
what's
politicians.
interesting to me is like they have no media, like they're not famous actors. I know she did some acting, right?
Right.
He's not really royalty anymore. They have no like major network that they run. Like I think that there's controversy because they're starting their own podcast maybe on Spotify, and so they say, hey, we don't want to be a part of Spotify if Joe Rogan is. But I don't
Spotify's
understand
like,
how they're staying
three
relevant.
people will listen to you anyway. We don't care.
I just don't get how Prince Harry, and nothing to like say that they have done anything wrong. I don't have anything against them, but I don't understand where they obtain influence from.
I guess,
I
yeah,
just don't
I would
understand.
argue they did do something wrong. Anytime that you try to remove someone's voice, even if you don't agree with it, that's wrong. Like, I'm not going to go, like, there's a ton of people I disagree with, unless they're, like, actually hurting someone, which maybe they could make that argument that Joe Rogan is hurting people. But come on, you're joking if you say that.
It makes the assumption though that they think that they are important enough to have
better
leverage,
or
right?
above.
Which I don't understand.
They're putting themselves above someone. That to me is like, I want to listen to you even less. But I love that Spotify did this. Someone brought up a really good point, and I don't remember where it was, but they said, what is Spotify going to do with the many people that they did cancel that talk just about the same things that Joe Rogan does? Are they going to go back and uncancel them because they picked him solely because of money?
Spotify cancel?
Yeah, there's a bunch of people that got removed from Spotify that Spotify like politically needed to not align with. But with this one, I'm going to bet, like, and there's no way to find this out, but I bet in his contract they would have to pay out a crap load of money if they bailed on him.
I bet they have a payout.
And
That's
so,
a good point.
But he also brings them so much business. And if he goes off of Spotify, would you use Spotify anymore?
In the end, for some music, I've started to use them for some music a little bit. But
would you then? Would you be as enticed
to,
or would you be like, yeah, I'll go somewhere else?
Not as enticed.
Right.
I've been starting to use them for Tim Dillon.
Okay.
I listen to Tim Dillon quite a bit, and I think that's mostly it. Tim Dillon, and then some armchair expert stuff.
Okay.
But
he's their hugest thing.
I didn't before. I didn't use Spotify before, so that's what brought me to them, right? But here's the thing. It's all about money.
It is.
A business is money. And if Spotify recognizes that they can get more money and more benefit from keeping Joe Rogan, despite the political pressure they have, if that's more money that they can gain than the other ways. And think about how many people are talking about Spotify right now. Spotify's loving this advertisement, I'm sure. They're getting a ton of free advertising too. Despite, potential artists that nobody really has that much, listening power to.
What it tells me is two things. Number one, Joe Rogan is probably more politically aligned with more people than anyone wants anyone to know. Like, as far as like kind of being central and willing to have a conversation, right? Also, Joe Rogan will bring them more money than the royalty of England.
Yeah, that's true. Well, and also, let's be real. Joe Rogan has more political power,
yes,
and social influence than maybe anybody else in the U.S. right now.
Yeah. It's
I don't
solely
know if
because
that's
he's willing to
true,
listen. That's the
but I
thing.
think it might be.
And here's
I
so
think it might be.
that kind of leads me into something else that I saw this week. I'm going to put it in our show notes. I want you guys to listen to it. I don't honestly care what you feel about guns and stuff. That's not the conversation that I want to have. I personally have some. I personally think it's very, very important that we have
I
it.
don't think they're real. I don't believe they're even real. No,
But
fake news.
JP Sears, who is a hilarious comedian guy on YouTube, has been getting a lot of flack. But recently he came out with a video, and I don't know if you watched it this week. I was dang impressed because he made fun of himself, and he said, here's a video I made where I talked in a Southern accent about gun owners and made them sound stupid. And he goes through every single thing that he did, and he goes, I want to apologize and say I was wrong. Why did I talk in a Southern accent? It's because the stereotype is that if you have a Southern accent, you're stupid. And he goes, I'm not saying that I think people with Southern accents are stupid. I was leveraging the stereotype that I did not create to make.
Who did this? Who
This is
said
JP
this?
Sears from, you've seen him. He looks like a vegan hippie on YouTube.
Okay.
He does a lot of comedy videos and whatnot. Anyway, he goes through like his transformation to realizing what the Second Amendment actually does.
JP Sears. Okay.
And
Gotcha. Yeah.
he talks about through the Constitution, he goes, here, I didn't used to like this document, and here's now why I do. And he goes through every single little thing, and he makes some funny jokes in there and whatnot. But he said in the end, he goes, I am never going to delete that old video. Even though I know I was wrong and it makes me look like I was uneducated and didn't know what I was talking about. He said, I think it's important because I'm willing to be humble enough to say, I believe I was wrong. I've now looked at this and I've changed my mind, and that's okay because that's what maturity looks like. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is one of the most educational videos about personal maturity that someone could have
like
put
that.
out. And it's a comedian. And what have I said for like the last few years? You and I both say it is like a lot of today's like kind of cultural evangelists are comedians because they're willing to like point out the absurd.
Well, and they also have the freedom to be a little bit more.
Yes.
They're given more freedom to not be politically correct, right?
Kind of.
That is
Chappelle.
Yeah, but even then, like the amount of jokes they say, like someone in a role of a comedian has more freedom than someone in a role of, a police officer or, someone working in a hospital. Like you don't have as much ability to make fun of someone in your environment because you have much higher expectations.
Yeah, some of them do. I hope
offensive.
it remains that way because it's. I guess it was cool to hear someone say whether or not you agree with where he came to and where he came from. Who cares? The fact that he was able to like not delete it, not be like ashamed of himself. He just kind of laughed at himself and was like, "Here's why I was in that position. Here's why I believe I was wrong." And he just kind of points them out and like goes through the video clip by clip, laughing at himself, saying like, "I can't believe that I thought this way. I enjoy the freedoms that I have, and this is why I have them." It was very good, and I would encourage people to go watch it.
I respect that. All right, guys, we're gonna hit some shower thoughts at y'all. Let's see. I have Trace.
I have Trace as
You
well.
have Trace. All right, I'll go first.
Okay.
I think it's kind of goes without saying, but it's funny to me to have this thought. Like anyone you meet on the internet is a male until proven otherwise.
Absolutely.
Which is kind of a hilarious thought. Like that's probably
they're
true.
doubly if you're playing a video game.
Right. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. It's getting different. It is splitting up, but generally you kind of have to treat it that way or else you'll get yourself in trouble.
Right.
All right. You can tell how bad inflation has been over the years by how much money people steal in heist movies of their times.
Ooh, that's a good one. I like that. That's a good point. More than
$1 million.
$1 million. That's nothing. Okay. More than a 6-pack of beer in the fridge starts to look like a drinking problem. But a whole wine cellar is considered very classy.
It's true.
Little little hypocrisy there.
What if it's one of those ones that goes into the floor, though?
I mean, it's cool, but that should probably be a dungeon, right?
Maybe it is. Maybe it's both. It's dual purpose. Yeah.
Drink my wine.
The irony of a cheeseburger is that you've taken something from a live cow and put it on a dead one.
Yes. Very true. Ooh, I like that. That's a good one. That's a really good one. Okay, my last shower thought. Some poor soul holds the record for the most consecutive red lights stopped at and probably doesn't know it. Ugh, infuriating.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of stoplights, especially like some of them in our town. I'm like, why is this even here? Why can't this just be a roundabout or everyone turns right? Like
Yeah.
they're timed and this, they're not sensitive. And you go in the middle of the night, you sit there for a minute and a half. Like, this is dumb. Like, can it just in the middle of the night just be a flashing red light? Okay. The person standing in front of you is technically the person standing the furthest behind you.
Ooh, I like that too. Hashtag live on a ball. Yes. That's good. I like that. That's a good one. All right, folks, ladies and gentlemen,
That is it.
we appreciate y'all. Thank you for tuning in, logging in, downloading, recording episode Buck 26. And we'll come to you
6.
next week with a Buck 27. And hope you have a fantastic week. Stay safe, stay classy.
San Diego.
San Diego.
Saint
We'll catch everybody soon. Diego. Well, something.
I don't think so. All
I
right.
think it means what you think it means.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.